Welcome back to The Perspective. Still with me today is Director of Museum Macan, Mr. Aaron Seeto. Aaron, we earlier talked about Museum Macan and what kind of artworks that they have in there, and it kind of depicts the history of Indonesian arts. And you mentioned that there's no way that a museum, it's very rare that a museum would be able to show all of its artwork at the same time. Why is that?
Well, I mean, at least for our museum, the collection is nearly 800 works, and even though we have quite a large facility, it's just never going to be possible. I mean, there's always works that will be in storage. And it also depends on the types of exhibitions which are on display. So not all works are necessary to tell that story.
So there's certain themes that goes on in the museum, and the artworks that you guys display sort of depends on what that is.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and then where does the artwork come from? How does the curating process work? Like, are these owned by the museum? Are they private loans from private citizens and whatnot? How does that work?
Well, for us, the museum's collection is based on the collection of the founder. And he's been collecting for over 25 years. Very, very unique collection for Indonesia, in the sense that Indonesia is at the core, and it makes up about 50% of the collection, but it also encompasses an international outward looking viewpoint. So 25% of the collection is European and American. The other 25% is broadly Asian, from the modern period through to the contemporary. So the collection spans about 200 years at least of art. Right.
And then I understand that Museum Macan has recently opened earlier this month, I think the 4th. And then, what sort of reception has the museum seen from Indonesians?
We've had a really amazing response. It's been really warming to see how the Indonesian public have come to embrace the museum. Our weekends, of course, are some of the busiest times for us, and we see people from all walks of life, and that's really important for us at the museum, that we want to encourage all kinds of people to think that they can feel at home within the museum. And of course, kids and students and their parents. We've got a space specifically designed for kids, and this sees a lot of traffic. There's activities. There's a commission that we've made specifically for children. You know, creating a link between the youngest minds and an artist, right from their formative years.
Right, and that's important, because when you're a child and you're introduced to art fairly recently, early in your age, that sort of sets a tone for their minds in the next few years.
It sure does, and I mean, not just for Indonesia, but for people around the world. It's important to have early experiences with art, because we know that whether or not you become an artist or a curator in the future, it helps to drive innovation. It helps to drive a slightly different viewpoint of history and the world around you.
Okay, let's move on to the art industry itself. Specifically the art industry in Indonesia. How do you think that the art industry in Indonesia, specifically in contemporary arts, has progressed throughout the years?
You know, Indonesia has a very strong contemporary art scene. I mean, it's something which is increasingly recognized around the world. Like, you know, we have questions and curators coming in from all around the world wanting to know more about the contemporary art of Indonesia. Great artists, really strong collectors, and but what it has lacked is it has lacked infrastructure, and that's where we hope that the museum can kind of fill that gap. And we've had a great response from artists as well, because they want to be able to see a space where they can present their work to a broader public. And that kind of critical environment is important for the development of contemporary art in Indonesia.
Okay, so when you say architecture, do you mean just space where people can go to?
Yeah, you know, and also to make sure that they have the right facilities to present their work. The opportunities to present all types of media, so from video through to painting through to installation. It's important to have we're offering a facility where artists can think very differently about how to present their work to the public.
Okay, and I'm curious on what you think. Throughout this year, earlier in this year, somewhere in the beginning of the few months, I've had the pleasure, our team have had the pleasure to go around Jakarta and sort of, there were some projects that were happening in Kalijodo, there were some projects that were happening in public spaces, where they were kind of doing like arts on murals on walls and whatnot. I'm curious on what you think about that.
You know, I think it's great. I think that artists and when they make really meaningful connections to communities and these are expressed in the public, it means that you can that you're contributing to a really vibrant scene, and that you're engaging people outside of the normal spaces for art. It's something which needs to be encouraged. It's something which we want to see ourselves as being part of that broader ecology. Yeah.
Right. And then one of the things that I've always kind of been curious about is government support for the art industry. I know that government, because we see a lot of government support for architecture developments and whatnot. You see us building roads, you see us building airports, you see us building train tracks. But what, from the point of view of Museum Macan, since you guys have only recently opened and whatnot, I'm curious if you guys have seen any support from the government.
Well, firstly, the Museum Macan is a private museum, and so we've been developed initially through private capital.
Okay.
I come from Australia, where there's a much stronger support for the arts by governments, and what we see, not just in Indonesia but also in Southeast Asia and around the world, is that private capital and private museums are beginning to take up some of the conversations that would sometimes happen in the public sphere. What we want to do in the future is to ensure that all people, like all of the actors, all of the people involved in who have an interest in the arts, are able to support it in the future. Whether or not that's building partnerships with government, building partnerships with sponsors, or with even other private philanthropists, this is what we can do through this museum infrastructure.
Right. And are there any plans right now, or any schemes that are already ongoing for that goal?
Well, you know, we've just opened, and we're always really happy to come to talk to people. Happy to share our vision and our goals for the future, and you know, because education is such a core of our thinking, and this museum, we see it really as a public space. We want to involve others in that conversation.
Right. And then wanting to involve others in the conversation, and as you said earlier, there's a lot of people. The reception, the response from the public has been great coming into Museum Macan, at least for the past week and a half, about 2 weeks or so since Museum Macan opened. I am curious as to what do you think about the younger generation, their appreciation for art in Indonesia?
You know, here in Indonesia, I think that young people are really curious about visual culture, and this is driven, of course, by social media.
Right.
Everyone, I mean, that's where a lot of people are engaging with the museum. They come in and they're sharing their experiences through social media. So we are really, you know, we know that young people are interested in what we do, and it's not just about taking selfies. There's also an element of really wanting to engage and understand what's going on.
Right. So there is a little bit of that digital platform factor that goes into this as well.
Of course, I mean, the 21st century, it's unavoidable. I mean, we want to build an institution for the 21st century, and so digital engagement is really important for us.
Right.
And we'll
that's
use
really interesting. I think we'll look a little bit deeper into the digital factor of in Indonesian art industry when we come back from the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us on The Perspective.